Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It's another preview and prediction video, and this time it's for the much anticipated Iga Swiatek versus Elena Rybakina Qatar Open Quarter Final. It's a rematch of the 2024 final where Iga Swiatek won her third straight Qatar Open, beating Rybakina 7-6, 6-2 in a very high quality match. We're going to get into this match. Before we do though, remember to that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you are listening on a podcast platform. Thank you to everyone. Your support is much appreciated. Okay, the head-to-head is 4-3 in favor of Elena Rybakina. However, on hard court, it's actually in favor of the Polish superstar, and the head-to-head on hard court, 3-2 in favor of Iga. Ironically, the other two matches they've played have been on clay, and Rybakina has come out on top in both Stuttgart and Rome. Off the top of my head, I don't know the years, but I can tell you Stuttgart and Rome. And of course, we know that clay is Iga's favorite surface. So that is an interesting little stat there for you guys. Iga's won the last three editions of this tournament, as I mentioned, and there is a repeat of last year's tournament. However, one thing that I have to mention, and Swiatek mentioned this in one of her post-match interviews, is that every year the courts play somewhat differently. So it's not like some other tournaments where you get a pretty reasonable level of consistency in terms of how they're going to play year on year. Of course, it can be tweaked and it can be changed, but generally speaking, you won't normally get big changes year on year. It could be after a few years, after 3-4 years, there might be a change. However, in Doha, she's saying that actually it's quite different. She has to very quickly try and adapt to the surface again. And it's pretty impressive considering that, the fact that she has to adapt every time to at least a slightly different surface by the sounds of it. And she still managed to win this title the last 3 consecutive years, just shows you how good she is at being able to adapt so quickly to the conditions around her. She's also won the last match between these two. So she beat Rybakina at the United Cup 7-6, 6-4 in a very interesting match. To be honest, I think Rybakina tends to give herself chances in these types of matches, and we know she's an incredibly talented player, one of the biggest hitters from the baseline, and she's got an incredible serve and just that star quality that I think you need. And Swiatek and Sabalenka have always historically struggled with Rybakina, and the head-to-heads highlight that. And Rybakina still has a leading head-to-head in this matchup, so we have to take that as it is. However, despite both players having to fight in the round of 16 matches against Noskova and Shramkova, respectively, Noskova was a 3-set win that Iga just came through as a very tight 3-set win. I think Noskova, so talented, and has beaten Swiatek, of course, last year, beat her at the Australian Open. She has such a good game, very young, talented Czech player. And Shramkova was straight sets for Rybakina, but Rybakina was a breakup in the first set, got taken to a tiebreak. It was not as straightforward as the scoreline suggests, despite both players playing some really good tennis, but then also maybe struggling a bit in that round of 16 match. Swiatek, I think, comes into this as at least a slight favourite. I would say it's probably 60-40 in favour of Swiatek. Now, in terms of tactics, there's a few things that I've picked up on from watching both players against each other and also against others. And for me, I think it's really important for Rybakina that she goes big in the forehand-to-forehand exchanges. And when I mean big, I don't just mean hitting with pace and through the court, and we know that she's got that ability already, but it's the depth which is really key. And if you go back and you watch that Doha final from 2024, she was rushing Swiatek quite a few times on that forehand side. And when she was able to get that depth and power in that forehand corner, Swiatek was being rushed and she was struggling, I think, to absorb the pace of Rybakina at times. And eventually that forehand would break down more often than not anyway in some of those high-level exchanges forehand to forehand, where Rybakina was really the one on the offense or on the front foot. However, this could have been sorted in the off season, and that's because of Swiatek's adapted technique on hard courts. And we saw at the Australian Open, I thought her forehand was really good throughout the Australian Open, and historically she has struggled a little bit because it is the fastest of the four slams in terms of the surface, and sometimes her forehand could get jammed. But actually, she's been taking the ball earlier. She's shortened her swing. I'm assuming courtesy of Win for Sets advice, and it's actually been very good. So it'll be interesting to see if it does hold up in this match, and if it does, it puts her in a really good position against Rybakina. If I'm being honest, for Iga, she needs to move Rybakina around. Rybakina is still a very good mover, but look, let's be honest. Iga is the superior mover. She is arguably the best mover on tour, and it's such a big advantage that she has at her disposal. She can lengthen the points and force errors with angles and depth, and take advantage of Rybakina's not lack of movement, but well, I guess just the fact that she doesn't move as well as Iga. I also think, and I saw this in the final, it was interesting to see Iga come to the net on quite a few occasions, and at times it worked, at times it didn't. One thing that she's very good at is actually hitting a dry volley, and I think she's better at hitting dry volleys than she is at volleying traditionally at the net. So it's something for her to bear in mind. I think variation is quite key against someone like Rybakina, because if you're able to get her off center, off balance, and out of her rhythm, then you take away a lot of her strengths when it comes to the baseline and rally play. Obviously, we know that the serve and return dynamic is going to be huge, and we'll touch on that in a second. But another thing I wanted to point out from the baseline was the backhand line for Iga. I think that's really, really key for Iga. In the exchanges backhand to backhand, if she's the one going line first, it's not about going line first. And because if you go line first with not enough quality, it makes not a lot of difference. But one thing that Iga does have in the locker is a very, I would say, top three backhand down the line. She hits a lot of winners with that shot. It's very short, compact, extremely effective. And Rybakina doesn't defend extremely well out of the forehand corner. And as I said, she isn't the best mover. So Swiatek won a lot of points in that Doha final last year when it got into a rally, and maybe it was at neutral, and then Swiatek was able to step on the front foot with that backhand line. It put her in a lot of advantageous positions, let's say. In terms of the return and serve dynamic, I mean, we know Rybakina is a fantastic server, top one or two servers on tour. Swiatek is top one or two returners on tour. So that that really serves up a very tasty matchup, especially on Rybakina's serve and her service games. Rybakina needs to be brave on the first serve. She went a bit safe in that second set in Doha last year, and she was made to pay. Both players are very, very proactive on the second serve return, and they should be, especially Rybakina. She's got great power and precision, I think, on both wings, and she should be trying to take the ball early on the return. She doesn't want to get dragged into long rallies. For Swiatek, we know that she likes to take the ball on the rise. She's very comfortable there. If I was Rybakina, I would be going into the forehand more often than not, similarly to what you would do against someone like Alexander Zverev on the men's tour. I don't think she should be going into the backhand, a huge amount. I think she should be trying to utilize going into that forehand. And I think she should be aggressive on the return. The second serve return dynamic and second serve dynamic generally could potentially be a massive factor in this match. And of course, we're going to talk about the +1 play. I think both players are very proactive behind their serve, but that's always a big, big point, of course, as well. And that is also affected, of course, by the return, right? If someone's returning right at your feet, you can't really do too much with it in terms of being on the front foot. So I think the key is going to be hitting effective first serves in spots, and then also make sure their second serves are brave. And if they're the ones returning that second serve, they are effectively trying to get, if not on the front foot, to neutral. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things to come from this. But I'm going to go with very bravely for Rybakina in 3 sets. Let me know in the comment section below who you picked and why. Thank you very much, guys. Stay safe and well.